You're listening to Perspectives in Parryville. Today, my guest is Mark Schuster, an environmental educator, musician and bushfire technical officer whose lifelong passion for Australia's natural environment has shaped a deeply personal career in nature, conservation, Australian history, music, education and bushfire management. In this episode, Mark reflects on growing up in suburban Brisbane, where an early fascination with bushland, birds and books set him on a path that would lead to studies in zoology, rainforest ecology and conservation. He shares the mentors, chance encounters and unexpected twists that shaped his journey, from an unsuccessful PhD that ultimately opened new doors to a career spanning scientific research, public service, environmental management and community engagement. Our conversation explores Mark's enduring commitment to preserving Australia's cultural and natural heritage. He recounts decades spent travelling through rural Queensland, recording traditional bush music, German Australian folk songs and oral histories, preserving stories that might otherwise have disappeared. We also discuss the power of music, memory and storytelling, and the importance of passing cultural traditions from one generation to the next. The Schuster collection, part of the National Library of Australia, contains recordings of folk songs and dance music from Queensland, and also stories, legends and recollections of customs and immigrant settlement, particularly German and Scandinavian, in rural Queensland. Mark plays many of the old German Queensland dance tunes on his traditional button accordion. Mark offers valuable insights into bushfire ecology and his current work helping communities prepare for bushfire risk in Sydney's northern bushland suburbs. We discuss the relationship between people and place, the value of walking as a way of observing and understanding the environment, and the emerging collaboration between Western fire science and Aboriginal cultural burning practices. We wander into conversations about poetry, nature writing, the influence of Australian poets including Judith Wright and Amy Mack, and the role that curiosity, generosity and lifelong learning have played through Mark's life. Mark shares his belief that caring for landscapes and the environment also means caring for people and the stories they carry. Here's my conversation with Mark Schuster. So good to see you, Mark.
Great. Thank you, Mark, for this opportunity too.
So, as we're going to find out more about the history of what's brought you to this,
where I am,
where we are in this moment, you know,
in this lovely spot in Ku-ring-gai. Yeah, beautiful, isn't it? With all the trees and the birds and frogs. So, yeah, a bit of bushland, and I suppose I've always loved bushland. I grew up, I'm nearly 69 years old, I grew up in Brisbane, which was then really a large country town, not like the Brisbane of today, it's grown into a real city. But back then it was very lovely. I was born in 1957 in a suburb called Oxley. My parents were very typical of the day. My dad was an engineer in the railways, a mechanical engineer, and his father before him, or my grandfather, had been a cane farmer in North Queensland, a German immigrant who came out about 1912 he came out and cleared the scrub in North Queensland for cane farming. But my dad was really interested in mechanical things, so became a mechanical engineer at the huge railway workshops in Ipswich, which had upwards of 3,000 men. My mum, until she was married, worked in a bank, but back in those days when you got married, you know, that was it for your job. So she was a stay-at-home lady and she looked after myself. My sister came 3 years later. So I grew up in a very typical sort of middle-class family, which was very common in those days, in a suburban house in Brisbane. I loved the area. There was still lots of remnant bushland around in those days. And even from about 5 or 6 years old, I had to be almost kept on a leash. I'd be a wanderer. So I'd often wander into the bushlands in nearby suburbia, and there was lots of it then. Almost as far as the eye could see, out towards a place called Jindalee, Mount Omni, which are now just filled with houses. Back then it was all bushland. And in those bushlands were fascinating characters. There were fellows still from World War One and World War Two living in huts, and they'd often invite me in for a cup of tea, or sometimes a bit more even though I was young, to drink and talk to them about their experiences. But I love the bush. I love the birds in the bush, the trees, just everything about it. And it fascinated me. I was also into books from a young age. I remember my mum telling me at 4 years old, they took me to the Toowong Library, which was then a new hexagonal building. And I was in my dressing gown in the evenings. I came out, it was loaded with books, and the librarians laughed, my parents laughed. So,
what sort of books?
All sorts. Back then I loved reading fiction, but I also loved bird books, fictional books. There weren't many. One of the few was What Bird Is That?
I know
by
that
Neville
one.
Cayley.
Yep.
It's one of the classics. And another one, Leach's Bird Book. Had horrible illustrations, some of these little books, but I had to do on them to learn all my birds and grow up. Nearby in the bush was a Passionist Fathers Seminary and retirement home. So I got to know some of the Passionist Fathers because is a place called the Fort in Brisbane, up above the Brisbane River where the bushland was. And I got to know them, and they would come wandering with me looking at all the birds and the plants. So I had that really great upbringing. When I was I went to primary school, of course, a state primary school. Then I went to somewhere called St Peter's Lutheran College. I'm a Lutheran by religion, and a lot of the German people were in Queensland. Some were Catholics, some were Lutherans, but I'm still a Lutheran, and it was a great school to go to. I had a wonderful biology teacher there. He's still my mentor. He's 85 years old. His name's Barry Jenke, and he fostered my love of the bush. My parents didn't like the bush so much, so Barry almost made me join the Queensland Naturalist Club in Queensland, and we go for weekend outings every month to bushland areas around Brisbane. Even 3 weeks on the Barrier Reef. I had the privilege of camping with him on Masthead Island with all the Queensland naturalists, and we'd comb the island for fauna, and also the reef, of course. It's a lovely reef spot. So I had those wonderful opportunities. When I was young, I didn't have much money. I wanted wildlife magazines, and they got me to go to a place in Edward Street in Brisbane that's no longer there, and up the top of the building were two lovely ladies. I didn't realise how influential they were. The name of one of them was Judith Wright, who became one of Australia's most famous poets, and the other one was Kathleen MacArthur, an early conservationist from around Caloundra. Together they were a force to be reckoned with, and they gave me a whole lot for free, Wildlife in Queensland magazine. So I came out, they made not just my day or week, my year, I think, by getting those magazines. Later on at school, I wasn't so much into sport. Every opportunity I'd be out in the bush. During sports time, when I should have been practising cricket or rugby, or I wasn't much of a rugby player, I'd run out of the grounds for about 2 hours down to a place called Long Pocket. It's in the river in Brisbane, and I met a fellow there called Professor Len Webb and his off-sider Jeff Tracy, and they were the two who founded the CSIRO Rainforest Ecology Unit. So they mentored me on rainforests, and I became very keen. I did a PhD, which I failed after 4 years of mountain climbing, looking at lizards and various vegetation types on mountain tops between about Cooktown and Kempsey. So yeah, that was pretty important for me, but not just the academic side, which I loved, but I failed, as I said, but it was the bush, being out in the bush, climbing mountains and getting to know the Australian bush really well.
So did you, what do you mean you failed? You failed your PhD?
Yeah, I failed a PhD, 4 years work, okay, back then. I went to the University of New England. I was recently married, and my fiancée later became my wife. We both became PhD students at the University of New England. I did a very crazy topic, which was pretty novel back then, on what they called Gondwana land and the affinities of our rainforest mountaintops with, South America, New Caledonia, all these interesting places that split apart 80 million years ago. And I was working on what they call biogeography, how the fauna, particularly little skinkered lizards, evolved on different mountaintops. Pretty novel. I think it's a bit novel for the examiners. Two loved the thesis, one hated it with a vengeance, and because of that I didn't pass. I didn't even have the chance to rewrite because it was a bit left field, my topic. But today it's become almost normal. It's funny, this is 40 years on, so paradigms change in science.
Yeah.
Really
so had you done earlier study before that?
Yes, I did a Bachelor of Zoology and Geology at the University of Queensland. I loved the time there, and an honours thesis also. That's 4 years' work before I undertook the PhD. I had a young family then, so I didn't dwell on it. I joined the public service in Canberra, actually. I went to Canberra as what they call an assistant research officer for Parliament House, the old Parliament House it is, and Admin Services, Department of Administrative Services, in the Property Office, Australian Survey Office, and I had a wonderful time learning about administration. I had to be dragged kicking and screaming because I came from Townsville, drove a Land Rover. 3 days it took me to get from Townsville down to Canberra. I felt I was in a different country. Bit of a mind-blowing experience for me.
So why, I guess, was that soon after your PhD?
Yep.
You made a decision, look, this is not for me, I'll go and...
I had to work. I had to work to support a young family, which I really, got into the groove of it in Canberra. But there's something that was really interesting. Just across the quadrangle from the old Parliament House is the National Library in Canberra. So I was a bit interested in music. I was never good at playing. I always wanted to play a guitar or play music. I wasn't much good at it. My wife, she played fiddle and concertina, those little hexagonal instruments. So I wanted to play. And I learned a button accordion way back then. And I'd sit on the steps of the old Parliament House in the sunshine during winter with my button accordion. Many politicians would come up and down those stairs and say, "Oh, you're doing a bit better today, Mark." They'd say, they were great actually. One who sticks in my mind, I will never forget, and I tell everyone in the Ku-ring-gai Council where I work, was Tom Uren. What a man he was. And he would come round our department, no matter how lowly you were in the department, he'd shake your hand and say, the most wonderful Christmas to you. He'd do that personally with every person. Since I've read about Tom Uren, what an amazing man. He had links with where I work in Ku-ring-gai Council. Our heritage was going to be destroyed, I think, in the late 1990s. And he said, if you value your area, your heritage, fight for it. That's what Tom Uren said. He was a real fighter, and he had been a boxer in his earlier life too, quite a well-known one. So I had a great time in Canberra. But I mentioned about the National Library. I would go there and listen to recorded folk music. There were two fellows. One's name was John Meredith, who went out collecting all the tunes before they'd die out in the bush. And the other one was a fellow called Warren Fay, who still lives in Sydney. He's not as young as he was back then, but they recorded on reel-to-reel tape our folklore from the people who played violins, accordions, concertinas, and sang the old bush songs.
So they just turn up at people's houses? Or
Yep, just turn up. They might go to a pub and ask, does anyone in this town play the old music, the old folk music, not even folk music, the old traditional bush music, which used to be everywhere. People played it in their homes, even before radio and certainly before TV. So I said to the good people in the National Library, I listened for a few months to their recordings every lunchtime. I said, what have you got from Queensland? They said, bugger all. They said, maybe that can be your quest, to go out there and get some harvest the good stuff and bring it in for us. So next 25 years, myself and my wife, we venture up every holidays before I went to live in Toowoomba in Queensland for 20 years. And that became the base for collecting, going out in the bush, getting people's stories, their folklore. I was particularly interested, being of German descent, any bits of language still left, and old German songs on the farms. Because I suppose on the Darling Downs, down the Lockyer Valley between Brisbane and Toowoomba, there were big German settlements from about 1880 to 1900, well before the First World War, and they prided themselves on their folklore, their songs, their music, and they were terrific accordion players. And many of those older folks still hanging on, knew their traditions, and I learnt my accordion style from them, and just wonderful.
So you're not only recording them, you're actually picking up, playing tips.
And being with them, drinking at the same time. A lot of them would have homemade wine they make, so imbibing pretty heavily at times, and learning all the tunes, the Germanness and just everything, the bushiness coming out. It complemented, I suppose, my love of the bush, but then I saw people who came to the bush and really, they might have farmed near the bushland, but they still loved Australia, they loved the bush. And I don't know, those, I suppose 25 years I just fell in love with the people and became dear friends, and the music became very important to me.
And then the kind of, it's building and it's contributing to the archive as well.
Yeah, well, a lot of those tapes then have ended up in the National Library in Canberra. And in the last few years I've had a few trips down to, I was a bit slack on my paperwork side, to sort of itemise each item and, write it all down, so that's
because I was imagining when you were talking earlier, it wouldn't just be a piece of music on a reel-to-reel tape in isolation. Inevitably there would be a title and a date and a location.
Yeah, that's right.
And a little bit of a description.
And some of those people I go back time and time and time again because they use so much in their heads.
Oh, right. That
for
would have
10
been,
years.
Right.
So, there's a fellow called Ron Curley and Norm Bougen, his uncle. They both played accordion, knew German tunes and songs. I go back. They became great friends of my wife and myself, and saw our kids when they were young grow up. So
some of those initial kind of recordings, did you kind of meet people that had already recorded previously? Like, did you say, well, I'm the new guy type thing?
Yeah, this older fellow, John Meredith, who's now passed away, he lived in Thirlmere, so I go and visit him and tell him about my experiences, and he'd often give me a few people he wasn't able to visit to go and see them or follow up on. There's a fellow at Tabora called Ottie Pfeiffer, that was his great uncle, so I was lucky enough to go and see him and hear some of his German tunes and his sayings. And
it's kind of a bit of a not so much unexpected, but it's like a kind of, well, I guess you would sort it out in a way, because you saw the library and then you saw what was on offer.
And it's funny, I went to this pretty well almost a German school. We had missionary sons and daughters from New Guinea coming down to this Lutheran school, and I felt a bit on the outer. I thought, why do I have to put up with this Germanness, I call it? And funny thing, I came and swung right round, and I wanted to explore my own heritage and my dad's and granddad's.
Search for identity.
Search for identity. So Australia is a real mix of different nationalities, as we know. And I've been I went to the Barossa on foot, searching for the German people because I knew I'd have too much to drink, so I couldn't drive. So I walked the whole Barossa Valley on foot with a recorder and my accordion. So,
wow, it's
trying to get
visual.
some of the. Yeah, I've had a great time in my life.
I can tell.
It's a wonder my knees and legs still are functioning, because I walk everywhere in Ku-ring-gai. I've been their fire management officer here now for 6 years. When I came down during COVID, I was lucky to get here from Queensland. No one would bring us down. But I've been very lucky, and I've walked all of Ku-ring-gai on foot, and I still do. It's amazing my legs hold out. Everyone laughs about me in the council. They all call me Skippy and say, hey, do you need a lift here or there, Skippy? I said, no, most of the time I love walking, because it gives me a chance to talk to people too, one-to-one on the streets about fire, because fire's a big thing here. Both the house side, asset protection with houses and fire is part of my job, but also we're in the wonderful bushland here, which we do burn now and then, plan burns, not just for the asset protection, but also for the ecological side. A lot of these plants grew up with fire over millions of years, so we can't exclude fire totally. So, that's a large part of my job, but walking and talking, which I love.
You're listening to Perspectives in Parryville.
Okay.
So you're very well read.
Not really. I'd like to read a lot more.
Well, you've kind of drawn to reading.
And always
getting
have been.
Information and
Always
knowledge. And then you've got this whole cultural kind of interest and practice.
Yes.
And then you're kind of telling us about this sort of fire management. There's a few things going on, but I mean, I don't know where you can continue. What can you tell us?
Yeah, since I've come to Sydney, I've been in Sydney 6 years now, in northern Sydney here, which I really love, and I love the harbour. I've always been really interested in poetry, okay? So I thought, is there a specific type of poetry for Sydney and the harbour particularly? And I've explored bookshops here looking for old volumes from about 1880 through to 1930, that sort of pre-Second World War, I suppose you call it, much earlier. And I found really specific there was many poets around Sydney, many of them knew each other. Many were ladies, not just men. And many of those people were also out in nature. They were naturalist writers and poets as well. There's one amazing lady, I have to tell you about it. Her name was Ella McFadden. She lived in Linfield, the house is still there. And she loved nature. She was a great poet. But she also was a real mentor, like my friend Barry Jenke is for me. She was to many girls at the time. This was the 1920s, 1930s. She founded a club called the Boomerang Club. And from Linfield, they would start walking about 2 or 3 in the morning. They would go right out to West Head. They would camp out there for a night. This is all walking, no buses, no nothing. Next day they walk right back to Gordon or Linfield, called the Boomerang Club. And they got certificates based on how far they could walk. Yeah, 42 miles was considered moderate if a girl, or sometimes young men could join them too, in the Boomerang Club could walk that far. But she also made them try and recite poetry and make their own poems.
So this is from your you found some books and you've done a bit of research.
Yes, I've done research. And another lovely lady in Ku-ring-gai, her house is still there in Gordon. Her name was Amy Mack. One of the first books I saw was called A Bush Calendar. And my mum had a copy too. I had it in Brisbane and it was beautiful. It goes through each month of the year, what birds are there, what plants are flowering for each month, with lovely little vignettes and pictures. I thought, where the hell does she... I came to Gordon in 2020. I looked up some data about her. She was 2 streets away. She lived from the council building. So I thought, my God, I have to do something on Amy Mack. So I spent the last 6 years collecting material on Amy Mack, her writings, many writings, her nature studies around Ku-ring-gai. But she also had a husband, Professor Lancelot Harrison, Professor of Zoology at Sydney Uni. So very dear to me, of course, and being a zoologist. And he assisted her in writings and excursions, places up to Barrington Tops. They would take students up in the rainforest. And yes, so nature people, I suppose, and Ku-ring-gai in the council, we've still got about 900 bush care volunteers, but we're continuing a tradition that started maybe 1900, even when the railway first came here.
So is this like just a self-directed project?
Pretty well.
You're kind of interested enough and you've kind of followed that line of
I have. I've followed it. The 6 years thing, I can't be up in my dear deep bush, I call it in Queensland. I'm in this edge bush, I suppose urban interface bushland I call it, but the people are what fascinate me here. The many nature people. So it's been wonderful.
What about the other aspect that you mentioned earlier about the fire kind of, how did that...
Yeah, I suppose I'd always been interested in fire ecology since the 1970s. I did some early work in it at the University of Queensland, and when I'm out in the bush, fire is probably the most important management tool we have in conservation in Australia. But while I was married, we lost my brother-in-law, sister-in-law and niece at Kinglake in terrible Black Summer fires in 2009. And that got me thinking, I should really devote a lot of my energy to fire management and people. Losing 3 people is pretty significant.
Yeah, it's significant.
So not just the ecological side of fire. I thought I've got to actually go somewhere where I can help people. Ku-ring-gai is supposedly the second, I think it's the second, not third, most fire-prone local government area in New South Wales.
Wow.
And they offered a job up, and I thought maybe I should come and start trying to help people, because fires, once they've been, they'll come again. We might have had 6 wet years, but fires will impact again. We have so many houses along our 100-kilometre long bushland interface here that people have to be aware what to do, Do they stay and try and defend? Do they leave early, which we recommend in a big way, because their houses, many older houses, aren't built to withstand bushfire. So that's the large part of my job now, to go out and do community work with people, not just individuals but groups. We have bushfire street meets. Our council is very good in putting them on. And
what happens at those?
We go in with RFS or New South Wales Fire and Rescue. We'll have a sausage sizzle at the end of a pretty fire-prone street and say, hey, this is what you do when a fire comes, this is what you should do. But a lot of my work is the house protection side. How can you simply, or maybe fairly cheaply, even though it's not often cheap, upgrade your house to withstand ember attack? Most houses around Australia are lost, not due to the heat coming up against your walls, your flames, but it's the embers that lodge somewhere and start a fire in the house.
Now, what can you tell us, for the listeners, just what are the kind of a few top tips?
Gaps. Get rid of any gaps in your house, particularly might be bad roofing. You might have tiles that are broken where embers can easily get in. Your weep holes and vent holes, make sure you have a 2 millimetre say aluminium or steel mesh over them to stop embers. It's stopping embers getting into the house, or actually importing. If you've got a bad deck that's falling apart, replace the timbers, otherwise the deck will catch fire. Fences. Make sure you don't have plants or mulch right up against your house wall, things like that. Try and make bushfire resilient plants. There are many of those we can recommend. So a whole suite of objectives. There's two sides of the fence. We try and look after our bushland side of the fence, where the houses meet the bushland. Okay, we'll have planned burns, that type of thing, to reduce the fuel and for ecological needs. But we can only do them about every 12 or 14 years because of the ecological needs of the plants to regenerate, okay? So in the meantime, the regrowth will come back up. You'll have about 8 years where you have a risk. So we say, hey, we've got this risk sitting here. What can you do on your side of the fence? It's really important. And often that's upgrading your house. And there's great materials on the web now. We've got a wonderful resilience officer in Ku-ring-gai Council I work closely with, and she is building a website to help people go through their house in easy steps to see what can be done. Often, it can be expensive to upgrade a house, but it can be done, just a few things, quite cheaply. For when a house is worth $2 or $3 million, maybe it's worth spending $50,000 on upgrading your house to resist.
So you've continued on with even though you're doing this kind of fire awareness raising and practice,
yep.
You've still continued on with the cultural, the music? Or?
Oh, very much so. I often take my accordion with me to council functions, or just out in the bush, or play in the evenings at my place. Or I might go to retirement villages. I might go to talk about fire, okay, to a big retirement village, but I'll always have my accordion. And at the end of the presentation, I'll say, would you like a little treat? Maybe for 5 minutes, and I'll play an old tune from Queensland I learnt, that type of thing. So the music will never go away from me. I just love it, and I think it's part of me. Many years ago, they did an Australian story, ABC, back in 1997 on me, and that was all about my collecting side, collecting the music. And as I said, at that time, I think I was put on earth to try and maybe play this type of music and keep it going, and I think I still feel that way about it after many, many years. So I suppose I'll be one of the main ones who carry the music forward. I went to interview people who were the last sort of, players of that type of music. Now I'm pretty well the last man standing, I suppose.
Did they open up readily, or did they need to be encouraged?
No, very little encouragement. They were ready to. They were really worried that the tunes they had, their stories would be lost. So they were more than happy. I rarely got a knockback, and as I said, many become great, great friends, and I was really sad. I still am very sad. It's hard to write. I'd like to write a book. Seeing I love books, I would like to write a book about these people, but I find it very hard. It's almost too personal.
Why is that?
I don't know. So many dear times I had with them, and lovely times. I think I find it hard to convey to the reader, to put it on paper for me, how important it was to me. I don't know, I suppose I could do it, but I'm a bit reluctant. I can write the facts down or write about a tune or something, but that's only the academic side. I'm trying to get to the heart and soul of the music, because that's what it is. And I'm really worried about Australia. We're losing these traditions, these old bush traditions. You know, I'm in a city now, but I suppose there's a lot of bushland, so I could still acquaint with it. But I see in another 50 years, maybe all those traditions, you know, the Australian bushman, it will only be a legend and not enacted. Even inland towns, I lived in Roma for 3 years, I saw the towns going backwards, so to speak, just hanging on by the skin of their teeth. So I worry about that country-city divide. I think Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane will just keep climbing and getting bigger and bigger. But what about the bush? What about our farmers? And what about bushmen themselves? How will that end up in Australia? Worries me. I don't know. With good reason, I think. I've seen really good times. I was too young for Vietnam too, I suppose, and just a few years too young for Vietnam. And we've had, yourself too, we've had a pretty peaceable life, I suppose, in Australia. Great country. As many people say, I think it's the greatest on earth. I don't want to travel anywhere. Most of my friends in council have been to Europe or other places. I don't think I've got any need to go. I just love it too much here.
So do you tend to just return back to similar kind of areas of Queensland and then
Yeah,
come
I
back?
love Queensland particularly, I suppose. The main range behind Brisbane is really important to me, the rainforest, O'Reilly's, which is on the, most people may have heard of it, Lamington Plateau, between New South Wales, the border, and Queensland, up in those rainforests there.
Quite beautiful.
Very beautiful. And one of my favourite, there's two books by a fellow called Bernard O'Reilly, the bushman. His family opened up O'Reilly's up there, over the hills and Green Mountains. They're still my favourite books. I might have read them 50 times, truly, go over and over them, and it's just something in them, the way he wrote. And he's not acknowledged as a really important Australian author, but he gets to my heart and
Was
my
it like
soul.
a memoir, or what was...
Yeah, of growing up in the mountains, in the rainforest mountains, very, very isolated. They didn't have cars back then. They'd bring pack horses with visitors. It became a resort in the 1920s, 1930s, so they would pack horse people up to their resort.
Day trip.
Yeah, more than a day trip.
Week trip.
Yeah, so I'm particularly interested in that part of southern Queensland and really ancient rainforests with great birds. And
Yeah.
I don't know, it just feels so special to me. Even though around here there's places that feel so special to me. I often have lunch every day in the Gordon Cemetery. Sounds strange, but it's peaceful. There's many very famous people buried there. The most famous botanist in New South Wales, Joseph Henry Maiden. I sit beside him and having lunch every day, but I don't think much of his botanical knowledge has got through to me. But yeah, it's just nice having, I don't know, I like heritage in me, to keep that flowing and going. Pretty important for me.
You're listening to Perspectives in Parryville. So it seems quite clear you have a passion and interest in it. You're driven by the environment, nature,
Yes.
and the human people.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's funny, you know, when I was really young, I think my mum tells me about 7 or 8 years old, I always wanted to become a professor of zoology. So that's very academic, isn't it? So that's why I went through university, did my degree in zoology honours, and then attempted the PhD, because I really wanted to be a professor and academic. Funny thing, as I said, I joined the public service. I got to know people, all wonderful people from different backgrounds. I've had a ball meeting people. And then I realised it's not just your technical or academic details that are important. There goes a butterfly, see? Part of nature, part of us. So it's not just those technical or academic details that are important in our world. It's how they relate to people, how people relate to the environment. Coming to Ku-ring-gai this 6 years here has really blown and opened my mind, I suppose, because people relate to the environment here. I could go back to Brisbane, people sit in their houses, they might go for a walk once a month in a nearby park. Here many of our even middle-aged to older people are getting out in the bush every week, digging around in their bush care groups. they're relating totally to the environment, and it's people and the environment together. If we lose that, some people say, I've read a lot about wilderness in Australia, keep people out, lock them out. That's not the way. People should be with the environment. It helps me. This very seat we're on, if I've got a really hard task at work, I need to nut something out, I might come to this seat after work on my way home. I might walk home, sit on this seat in this beautiful spot we're in with the bushland, the birds, the butterfly flew past, our frogs down here in Hammond's Hole, and it will help my mind to sort something out. And they might say to me at work back in council, hey, where's Mark been? Or Skippy been, where is he? And someone might say, oh, he's out in the bush thinking about something, and that's pretty true. And my best thoughts come to me while I'm sitting maybe on this chair, and I might bring a piece of paper with me and I'll write a poem. Might be a pretty terrible poem compared to some of the people I, read their poetry. Some of the famous poets like Douglas Stewart, who lived near here over in St Ives Chase, and but yeah, it's really important that relation between people and bushlands.
Yeah, what's going on there with that kind of, because it is something that's like kind of a bit intangible, but it's something that people would readily skip over and not.
It's
really...
easy to skip over. You could look at the bushland by itself, which is easy. It's easy to do academic studies of, say, along the, this fire trail here, about the bush we've burnt down on the lower side and the unburnt bush on the upper side, but it's the relationship with people with it too. As I said, half my job, I suppose, is the people and asset protection side of bushland. But I have to get across them the importance of the ecology as well, that we're burning not just for them to reduce the fuel loads.
Tell us about this frog.
Yeah, they're the Cronea signifera, the eastern common toadlet. They're quite common here. They like the watercourses, and we've got this little pond down below it. But there's also a frog here, a really significant one, called the red-crowned toadlet. He's got a little red crown on his head. Beautiful, actually. A real king of frogs, we could call him. And actually, they don't need the water. A little pool of rain will come, he'll breed in that, and the frogs go back into the leaf litter. So they don't just live alongside the creeks, they're in the leaf litter. So because of that, they're only found in this Sydney sandstone. When we're burning, we do a planned burn, we have to be really important. We take account of a lot of our little critters, that we don't burn the whole block, that we have to burn in patches, that type of thing, a patchy burn. A bit like the Aboriginals might have done with their cultural burning.
Yeah, maybe I know you've been involved in some of that.
That's right.
So for the listeners that maybe have no context, what is that?
Cultural burning is really, really interesting. It's not just the fire aspect either. It's the Indigenous people. They've been here maybe 60 or 80,000 years. They got to know, walk and talk their country really well. And they did use fire as a management tool, whether it was to make their pathways, to gather food, particularly wallabies, kangaroos and goannas. And they used fire specifically in different types of country. They would not burn the canopy of the trees. You might go past the planned burn around Sydney, you'll see the canopy burnt, the tops of the trees. That's not the way to do it. They would have a low intensity burn, might go up to our chest height, if that, and it would be a patchy burn, not 100% of any whole area burnt. It might be 70% with patches of unburnt leaf litter and small plants, and that would be a refuge for many of the local little animals to come into and survive, and then after the burn, recolonised from these patches. So cultural burn, it's from the heart, from their heart, their traditions and law, their own law, and the burning part is just part of that whole huge cultural exercise. And actually our council, Ku-ring-gai, is assisting at the moment in a proposed cultural burn in a bit over a month's time, hopefully, down in Lane Cove catchment with some wonderful people from the Darug Women's Cultural Alliance.
So you've got all kind, because inevitably there would be guidelines and parameters, of course, for safety. And,
we have council, lots of those.
So how do the two come together?
Very hard. And actually, that's been occupying me for the last few months unto this very day, till you picked me up
Well, you don't need to overshare, but you could tell us maybe, just sort of.
We're very prescriptive in our Western fire management. We say you burn between these temperatures on this level of humidity, but without knowing the real country we're going to burn in, every little intimate detail of it. Whereas our Indigenous friends, they knew the country, walked it, talked it to each other, and knew how fire would approach different types of angles in the landscape. Gullies, ridge tops are all different in terms of fire. So their traditional knowledge wasn't written down, and very difficult probably to write down, the complexity of it. Our Western side's a bit simpler. We have pretty, specific parameters, and the key to the future of cultural burning in a big urban area like the Sydney Basin will be bringing the two systems together. There's not much legislation at the moment. It's lacking on that side. That will come with the future. There's something called a New South Wales Cultural Fire Strategy that government's released, but again, many gaps in it which have to be filled. I suppose it's up to projects like we're working on at the moment, with Dr. Joe Ray down at Macquarie Uni and the ecologists and the Darug Women's Group, to get comparisons between, the traditional burning of the Indigenous people and the Western style hazard reduction burns. Put them together somehow into what we call right-way science. That's the future, I suppose.
Yeah, I keep thinking of these poets that you kind of mentioned.
Wonderful poets.
100 years ago or so.
Yeah, wonderful.
And they're relating to nature.
Particularly Judith Wright. She looks so deeply. She's lived in Queensland on Mount Tamborine, down east of Canberra in the bush, upland bush there, and she always...
What
nature
is that?
in her.
What's his hand gesture
From my heart.
mean?
My heart. You've got to have it.
Can you weave some words for us?
That's the bush out there we're looking at down there.
What happened? What was her experience, do you think, or any poet's experience as they're in wilderness, they're in nature,
wilderness, yes.
And then what happens?
They've got to try and put that down via the heart and their mind onto paper.
But what's that?
Whatever that whole ethereal experience, the ethos, the whole...
Right.
There's a lot more into it than just going over and feeling this plant. It's just the totality of it.
Can you
the
paint us a
holistic
picture
side.
Of what when you sit on the bench and you've got
I'm looking
few
at
minutes?
it. We might see trees, we might see trunks, we might see leaf litter and grasses and the shrubs particularly. But it's the air above us, how it smells, the feelings of it on my arms. And some days it will be bloody hot and humid. Today, just beautiful. It's almost tempting us to think how lovely, what a beautiful day it is.
Let's hear it.
Yeah. Well, the bird calls in the distance. Being a zoologist, I know what most of our birds around here, knowing what species at different times are coming. Maybe it's trying to unravel some of the complexity of the bushland, which we can never really get to know properly in a scientific way, into my heart, into my mind, put the two together somehow. I think that's what Judith Wright did so well, and to me she's at the top echelon. Douglas Stewart, as I said, quite an amazing man, a poet in Sydney. He also did the same with nature. He wrote a whole series on rock carvings, I know down in Ku-ring-gai National Park near us here, things like that, and tried to convey nature on paper. It's really, and Amy Mack did really, really well, as I spoke about before. It's these nature poets and writers. I suppose that's where I've become really keen coming to Ku-ring-gai, where there's so many of them. It's like an epicentre.
Well, I guess they've got that kind of beautiful natural environment to
live in, to walk in.
They're surrounded.
I'm just so lucky to be able to walk this country. Even though I spent 3 years in the Carnarvon Ranges in central Queensland. They had an aura about them. I could walk along a track and you truly feel you're walking in tracks of the Indigenous people before you. And they were still buried in the caves up along the escarpments. Many, many, many isolated areas there. And I suppose at my work they still get sick of me talking about that, the wonders of the Carnarvon Ranges. Here it's on a smaller scale, but there's just as much wonderment here. It's just finding it. Yeah.
So when you're on country, what does country say to you?
I can feel friendly country, I really think it is friendly. This place to me is incredibly friendly. I can go into a deep, dark gully. Might still be friendly, but I can go to another ridgetop where it just feels. There's something about the feeling. Something's happened there before. I don't know what, but something isn't as friendly. Yeah. So I can feel, I've got some sense. I don't know what it is.
So you said before about your own kind of poetry.
Yeah,
and
I do write poems.
You write it down, you try and capture it.
Try and capture it. I don't think I'm good at it. I don't think I'm good. Not like Judith Wright or those.
Tell us about that, like the process maybe. Like is it, because you're trying
It will just come to me, it's funny. A theme for a poem in a certain place, it will come to me.
Like what, for example?
Meeting someone, I suppose, at a certain particular place at a particular time. When I had loss in my life, I would write poems about my brother-in-law who perished in the fire. He studied zebra finches. He became the world authority on the zebra finch. Amazing, isn't it? And he wrote a book for Oxford Uni Press. He loved zebra finches and he studied them for 30 or 40 years. And I wrote a poem from zebra finch to eagle. And I see him now as up in the sky looking over everyone. He became a wedge-tailed eagle. And they zoom along this, probably twice a day they come along our interface here up in the sky using the thermals. So he's still there, I think.
So we're reaching the end of our chat.
Yes.
What do you want to leave people with?
I suppose down here in Ku-ring-gai, I'd like to leave people with how obsessive and intense I've been to do with nature, I suppose. We're so lucky around this beautiful area where we have many houses. Remember, we're less than 20 kilometres from the GPO in Sydney, and look what we've got around us. My message is for people to care for the bushland, to think about it, to walk it, get to know it as well as we can. I've only scratched the surface in my scientific side of bushland, even though my heart and mind side might, really appreciate it. For people to appreciate it, not just those who've been here for many generations, but all our recent people who've come to Ku-ring-gai, and many come because of the bushland. They might want to live right beside it. 99% of the time it's beautiful and lovely. Just be wary too of that 1% when a big fire could come through, and be ready to leave early, that type of thing. But I think appreciation of the bushland, appreciation of other people. We really have a great community in Ku-ring-gai, and often when I was younger I said I was into the technical side. I forgot about community, people. I was wrong for that, I suppose. People are so important.
You caught up with a lot of that over your years.
Yeah, I think the people side I've caught up with. The musical side, I made so many dear friends. I think in my 68 years, nearly 69, I've been very, very fortunate. I've grown up in a wonderful, I had wonderful parents, wonderful sibling, just everything wonderful set for me. I went through great schooling, universities, which was free, great for my parents back then. I've been just so lucky. I've been many places in the bush, which I've loved every one of them. I can't sort of say which is better than others. Each experience is great. I think for people to experience life fully, take it on and work with it and love other people, be understanding, tolerant, and have a great time. Have a good laugh too. I often make people laugh, so that's not the aim today, but yeah.
In this episode, I chatted with Mark Schuster. You can find more information about Mark's work with the National Library of Australia in the show notes. Thank you for listening to Perspectives in Parryville. If you enjoy conversations about education, creativity, and the big ideas that shape our lives, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with others who might enjoy it.